Hello, thank you for joining us and welcome to the BIMA Awards showcase of some of the award-winning entries of the BIMA Awards from 2024. Today we're going to be joined by Emma Huysmans from Flipside. They were BIMA Award winners for 2 awards last year, the Campaign Effectiveness Couch to 5K and the Charity and Social Enterprise Meet Elliot.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Lovely to join and talk a little bit about some of our much loved products.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Emma. So I guess the first question, can you just tell us a bit about the award-winning projects?
Absolutely. So 2 quite different projects. On the one hand, we've got Couch to 5K, which I think yourself and hopefully people listening will have, a lot of people will have heard of. It's a much loved app. It's been around since 2016 now, which is, really a lifetime in app terms, used by 7 million users. And this project was really a bit of a revitalization of what's a much loved app already. So introducing some new and exciting features. So 2 of the core ones were introducing buddy runs. So that was a new feature that allowed people to run with their friends or with their family by syncing up on the app. And then introducing a series of runs that people who'd completed the program could do. People who'd sort of got through and got to their 5K, who wanted to stay in the program and progress. So that was really about improving the existing product. And then Meet Elliot, our award winner in the charity sector, was an AR experience, and that was really about disrupting category norms. So this was something completely different. It was coming into the animal welfare charity sector and trying to create something that was very different to your sort of standard campaigning direct mail that featured sort of quite sort of sad pictures of animals, or a TV ad with your typical sad music, sad voiceover, which has done a pretty good job for quite a few years, but wasn't really cutting through anymore. And doing something very different, which is what we did, which was an AR experience, which literally brought a baby elephant into your living room, which, it's something that was completely different that I've got an enormous amount of affection for, and again, did brilliantly well.
Wow, yeah, they're both 2 great projects. And so just touching on the Couch to 5K, like you mentioned, I mean, like everyone knew about that one. It was huge. But what was the thinking behind it, and like the features, and what's the impact that you've actually seen from that?
For the features, for those 2, and well, for all of them really, it's very user led. But I think for all of the feature development, generally how we get to them is a mix of talking to our users and then looking at the behavioral science principles that we think will lead to the biggest impact in terms of target behavior. So with buddy runs, for example, users in our user research, of which we do a lot, had actively told us, actually, it would be nice to be able to run with people. That's quite a classic activity, people going and running groups and running with people. They wanted the opportunity to potentially run with their friend who might be in Scotland when actually they're in Liverpool. But equally, what we knew from a behavioural science point of view was that the concept of social support is a hugely effective behavioural change technique in terms of habit behaviour. So actually we had this lovely mix of the 2, and that's where we really know we've got a winner in terms of the feature when those 2 things come together. So we looked at how could we bring those 2 things to life. And for buddy runs, it was by giving people the chance to have that experience by syncing up their apps. Really, in essence, quite simple, just being able to sync up their runs so that they could run at the same time. For beyond runs, that really feels like a feature that was co-created with users, and in a way it almost sometimes feels like cheating, like they're writing your strategy for you, because it was something that they'd said, we really want to be able to progress within the app. So we worked with experts to look at what would be the safe next step to progress in your running, and developed 3 apps with a trainer that could help, 3 runs with a trainer that could help users to progress safely after they got to 5K, and that they could keep coming back to. So if users didn't want to kind of move on to the next stage, they could stay within it. Uptake's been fantastic of the features, and we've seen that people who use those beyond runs will then stay within the program for longer. which means that they are maintaining that habit, which is one of the hardest things in lifestyle changes, getting people to maintain. And we're now looking at some evaluation to see if people that use the buddy runs are then likely to stay in the program for longer. So I'm excited to see what we get off the back of that.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And I mean, you mentioned about feeling like you're cheating, but that you've got to give people what they want and or what they're more likely to use, especially something like this. And again, and it's often the best, most simple ideas that seem the most obvious, but when no one else has done it before, it's still something you need to be proud of because it's actually worked.
100%.
And then moving on to Meet Elliot. So, how did the idea for an AR elephant come about?
Well, I mean, as I said before, we sort of knew that we needed to disrupt these category norms that weren't cutting through anymore. And at the same time, we had this challenge of needing to bridge a generational gap. So we had a core of donors that were of an older generation. We needed to bring in younger donors, but absolutely while still including that base. So we sort of knew that we needed to find a digital solution, but one that was quite inclusive. And then we also, had this insight that kind of felt interesting to us, that people were much more likely to engage in causes that felt closer to home. So we sort of thought about how can we bring this cause of orphaned elephants closer to home, and make it real for people, which, a lot of ideas were thrown around, but then we got to this idea of, you wouldn't walk past a baby elephant that was, suffering in the street. If it was literally there in your home, you'd want to help it. And we hit on this idea of, what would it be like if you actually could see one and have one in your living room? Actually doing that, felt like it would be highly irresponsible. So an AR experience felt like it would probably be the next best thing. And that's where we got to. So, the brilliant sort of digital tech guys on our side, and the really passionate people over at IFAW had thousands of images of Elliot, who was a real baby elephant, that we used to create this wonderful AR experience that means that you could actually have a baby elephant in your living room. You can sort of see what his needs are, see actually the staggering amount of milk that a baby elephant would need, the actual size it takes up, what it takes to keep him warm. But yeah, that's where it was generated from, this idea that we needed to bring the idea closer to home.
Again, really clever and brings a new meaning to the elephant in the room. But with both projects, they're clearly, I mean, when you talk about them, they're very good, unique, interesting, engaging. But no matter how good the project is, you still have to make it stand out when you're actually submitting the awards entry. And having been a judge as well, and also submitted awards, being on both sides of the table, you can see sometimes you see submissions and they're clearly a good project, but they just haven't articulated the points well enough to actually get the maximum points. So how did you make sure that your entry stood out, especially considering how different they both were?
I mean, I think with the two of them, they were such different challenges. And I always see sort of writing an awards entry a bit like writing a strategy. It is sort of storytelling. They both were such different stories, so they sort of naturally necessitated a different way of telling the story. So I think the differences in them became quite clear. I think we would have been doing something quite wrong if the entries had read in any way similarly. I think Meet Elliot, in a way, was a more standard, a sort of a more typical awards entry to write. Having this sort of big creative idea. I think potentially the couch one was a little bit harder when you're talking about revitalizing a product. And how did we bring that to life when it was something that had existed for a while? And I think what we landed on there is that we really needed to tell the story of the app itself, the journey that we'd been on, and the human impact that it's had over the years, and to bring that to life rather than sort of diving too deep into, we did X with this feature and it had this impact. We needed to tell the human story of what this product had done, and how we'd taken it to the next level. And I think that's what made the entry shine.
That's great. And what anything particular that you learned from the submission process that really helped add to that shine?
I think, potentially not so much with this specific submission process, but what I've kind of learned over the years that stood me in good stead for submission processes in general is that it really is like writing a strategy. You know, what you absolutely need to have is a good story. You need to have a clear problem that you're solving. Bonus points if it's an interesting problem. A solution to that problem, not a different one. And you need to have the impact stats to back it up. And if you don't have those things, there is no amount of wordsmithing that's going to cover that. So, you know, you absolutely shouldn't be entering the award in the first place. So I think, you know, over the years, there's certainly been times where there's something that you're so passionate about and you think, you know, surely we should be entering this, but you just don't have the analytics that year. And I've definitely learned that if you don't have those three fundamentals, then, you know, save yourself the torture. If you have that, then great. You can get into the crafting and really telling your story beautifully. But you have to have the fundamentals.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And what would you tell someone who's still thinking about entering for this year's awards? Is there anything you wish you'd known when you did it last year?
I think for Couch in particular, something that maybe we hadn't anticipated is that you're not necessarily going to have the analytics that you want to tell your story just lying around, you know, in your dashboards. You might need to do specific requests. We certainly did for our entry to tell the specific story that we wanted to tell, especially for something that's around a sort of product development story. We needed to request specific analytics. That takes time. I think, you know, all of these things generally come down to time. So make space for that. Just because you know you've got kind of a few impact stats lying around, they're not necessarily going to be the ones you need. And I think the other thing just to bear in mind is obviously there's the option to submit a video. That's brilliant. Video is time consuming to make. So try and think about how you can use that for other purposes, because ideally you don't create a video that is just used for your BIMA submission. You then can create an asset that's a wonderful way to just show off your project in general. So if you think a little bit ahead of time, you end up with something that's actually really valuable to have overall. So I think those are 2 pointers. And overall, like, just know your dates and work back from there.
Yes. Well, Emma, thank you so much for sharing. Those projects both sound really, really interesting, and and congratulations again for your wins last year. And I hope you managed to have some more success this year as well. And
thanks so much.
For all the people that aren't as organised as Emma and ahead of schedule, there's an extended deadline for the awards, which is to the Thursday, the 31st of July. So there's still a couple of weeks. And you can go to bima.co.uk/BIMA-programs/BIMA-awards and get your awards entries in before the 31st of July. Thank you very much, Emma.
Pleasure. Thanks.